everybody, Josh Sigurdson, World Alternative Media here, and of course we're joined by author and economic analyst here at WAM, John Sneisen. And there has been a lot of talk in recent years, especially under Trump, that the economy was doing great and everyone's moving to the United States, all these companies, and they're stopping building plants in other countries. I still see those articles rehashed a lot, and it might be true to a smaller scale with a few companies, but most of the articles I see are from like January 2017. Things have changed a bit as the peak of the bubble hit, which isn't Trump's fault. It isn't anyone particular's fault. It's massive amounts of investor speculation, banks, and government in general. So I'm not placing any blame on him. It was going to happen one way or another, Democrat or Republican, Pepsi or Coke, But anyway, there is this article out of Zero Hedge, which I wanted to mention because we've gone into GM as well as General Electric in recent days, and it's pretty shocking what's happening to these once great behemoths. As this article says, Black Monday at GM, 4,000 layoffs expected this week. And as the article goes into, just days after we reported of the dismal start to 2019 for the U.S. auto industry, General Motors will begin involuntary layoffs that will leave at least 4,000 workers without a job. According to the Detroit Free Press, the Detroit auto manufacturer is planning to begin layoffs just days before its fourth quarter earnings report. These layoffs are one of the first pieces of a larger restructuring that CEO Mary Barra announced in November. 5 plants in North America are planned to halve production, and 14,000 total jobs are slated to be cut. Part of the restructuring is to realign the company's infrastructure to produce more electric vehicles. People familiar with the matter stated that the company was actively trying to compete as many layoffs as possible before earnings. GM hasn't confirmed this, stating, "We are not confirming timing. Our employees are our priorities, and we will communicate with them first. We've indicated that the involuntary reductions would happen in the first quarter," a GM spokesperson said. I wanted to also mention another article, John, that you sent me here out of Reuters, because look, there's a lot of people really concerned about this. And yes, this has been an ongoing issue. We're talking about it quite a few months ago. And unfortunately, we've seen all of this happen before. Detroit is a big red flag. When most people hear Detroit these days, it's synonymous with the horrible downturn over 10 years ago now. But anyway, as this article out of Reuters says, weak demand for U.S. consumer loans fuels spending outlook worries. And the article just goes into issues in the auto industry, etc. But one point I want to take out of this article is this. Now, though a Federal Reserve survey of banks released on Monday shows that the net share of banks reporting weakening demand for auto and credit cards rose sharply in late 2018. A net 18.2% of banks surveyed by the Federal Reserve reported weaker demand for auto loans, and 17.4% on net reported lower demand for credit card debt. Both were the largest shares in records that go back to 2011. And I quote, "This provides evidence for the view that confidence will hurt spending," said Louis Alexander, an economist at Nomura. So, John, I wanted to go further into this because this is corresponding with the sales in the U.S. Of vehicles dropping about 10% year over year at some point in this year. It's people are predicting it's going to happen this year. This is a huge issue because we've talked about the auto loans bubble years ago, and of course another one that we were early to the draw on. I wouldn't say early to the draw as much as I'd say we were predicting something that was inevitably going to happen, and we said we wouldn't know when it was going to happen, but we knew it was going to happen, just looking at market fundamentals that have completely been wiped off the table. John, can you go into this massive story, because people aren't giving it enough attention considering the impact that it's going to have going forward?
Well, I don't know how many times I gotta yell, debt, debt, debt. It's unbelievable how the mainstream media and everybody is ignoring this massive debt problem that we built up for ourselves. It's ridiculous how gigantic it has become, and now you're seeing all these things that are happening as we were talking about in these articles. all of them are because of that debt is hitting like its peak, and nobody's able to get into any more debt. People are squeezed. You got inflation, you got taxation, and then you got all this debt on top of it. People don't have very much money left to do anything anymore, and they're basically wage slaves working 24/7, 2 or 3 or 4 jobs in order to survive. A lot of people, and the middle class is really dying out very fast in the United States. The middle class is the debt class, as we can also call it, because they are the ones that actually are created out of debt, or else you would.
Yeah,
just
I'm having a hard time picking
poor.
them out in a crowd these days. I don't see a lot of them walking around much.
No, and but this is how it is, Josh. You had the car title loans coming out. We blew the whistle and warned about how bad that is. Like when you basically take out a loan, like a line of credit on your car, that it's a massively devaluing asset. That was really bad. And then, of course, there's several places now in Canada even that was popping up that says, no credit, no problem, we'll get you a loan. And I hear that
loans on
constantly.
loans on loans on loans. That's sustainable.
Yeah, and then we actually did an article. I don't know, I think you were kind of mentioning about it, but what we were talking about was actually subprime auto lenders that were really struggling and starting to go bust. I don't know what what's happening there right now, if there was a whole bunch of bailouts. I haven't really looked into that. And then, of course, we talked about the auto-backed securities, which is just another form of mortgage-backed securities, which blew up, massive derivatives that blew up, tranching of taking a whole bunch of auto loan debt and creating a credit derivative out of it and putting it and selling it as AAA, most likely, to stupid pension fund managers. So that is another thing that's underlying to all these auto problems as well. So there is a lot of issues here that they're not even mentioning in these articles that have been, laying under the surface, bubbling and showing itself every now and then. And they kind of talk about, oh, now we're worried about this. But problem today, Josh, is that we're so focused on day-to-day basis when it comes to investing and money and everything in life. We don't really look at like the longer span. Even like 3-4 months down the road is even a very, very long-term thinking today. And maybe we should look at the sustainability of our system as a whole and actually see that we're hitting that peak of the system, and that it might not be very sustainable, all this debt that gets created, all this Keynesian economics, and it might actually be a complete devastation to the economy over the long term, over like the 20 to 40, 50, well, now it's almost 50-year span that they had a full fiat currency and a Keynesian fractional reserve banking system. And you're seeing all the destruction that are starting to just pop up out of nowhere. People think it is, but we've taken a look
We've been talking about it for a long time, John, and I got the original article we did. I wrote this article back in June 1st, 2017. We did this video at the time. It was called Crisis in the Auto Industry. The Bubble Has Become Unsustainable. And as the article I wrote kind of goes into, we talk about the massive bubble burst creeping closer and closer in the auto industry following the biggest subprime auto lender, Santander, being dubbed the new century of auto finance, skipping income verification on 92% of auto loans, and that was in June 2017. And people said, "Oh, no worries, everything's good."
Yeah, don't tell anyone about that, Josh. Shh.
Yeah. And John, let's talk a bit about just overall the financialization of industry today, because it seems like it's obviously a terrible idea, but everyone seems to want to get into it. We saw that with General Electric as well, and not doing so well, I might add. So what do you think?
Well, that's the problem, Josh, is the financialization of the economy. We talk about that a lot. And what has happened with others, like they actually get into the lending business because having a fractional reserve bank printing money out of thin air is pretty darn good compared to actually just having to make a car and using resources to actually make it. There's so much more leverage to be made and so much more money to be made out of nothing if you actually just create all this debt out of nowhere. And that's why you see Home Depot, Canadian Tire, Best Buy, almost everybody. You can buy stuff on credit. All the furniture stores, like everywhere, you can actually buy stuff on credit because people don't actually have the money. It's become so expensive. The amount of inflation that has happened over the time span versus the actual wages that have been kind of stagnant. there's so much less money, and that's why you're seeing constant terms of loans, like auto loans and everything is going up. There's always longer and longer terms on these mortgages, on the loans that we get into, because it's becoming more and more unsustainable high inflation that we're not really seeing. But we are getting, like, most people are getting stuck in these massive corporations, getting paid like very little raises over time, and you're seeing now the big issues that are coming up because they didn't get the raises. But the problem is, when they get the raises, you would see even way more inflation, right? And that's why, like, Trump bringing the auto industry and everything back, that they're saying that would actually makes cars and everything cost a lot more, and that would just making things go even faster and way higher inflation. So you're just seeing how vicious the cycle gets over time. With you get more salary because you can't afford anything because of inflation, but then the salary then increases all the prices down the line, and then you buy a product at the other end which is way more expensive than it was before. So now we got to go and ask for the highest salary again. So it's just a vicious cycle of Keynesian economics, Josh.
Well, John, Keynesian economics has been proven to be not sustainable and actually horrible for over 100 years now. I think it's about time we learn from the past mistakes. I understand way back when people didn't understand money, they didn't understand the history of it because there wasn't enough of a history of certain tactics to actually build upon. But now we have so many examples of Keynesian going bust, Keynesianism, and this is like Keynesianism on crack or steroids or something, because it's not even true to the original idea of Keynesianism.
It's on crystal meth. It's on crystal meth, Josh.
It's just as extreme as it gets. So going forward, people need to be responsible. People need to understand money. People need to decentralize and figure out the fact that these banks and these governments want them in servitude, want them in debt servitude. Debt equals, prevalence for them. They win, we lose. People need to stop getting loan on top of loan on top of loan, and then loans for those loans, and just piling it up forever, perpetually. This is very unhealthy, very unsustainable, always comes down, and this is just part of a bigger bubble, the everything bubble we've been talking about worldwide, everything from pension bubbles, real estate bubbles. We're talking today about the auto bubble and what's actually the inevitable circumstances of it. We see the student loan bubbles. We see, at the same time, the derivatives bubble, multi-quadrillion dollars, by the way. And then on top of that, you got the dollars being swapped out of throughout the world. You've got a completely unstable economy as all fiat currencies revert to zero. And everything is starting to wobble and get shaky and get worse and worse. And as we've been talking about it for all these years, we've been vindicated again and again and again, because it's just what the end point, the inevitable climax of these massive centralized cartel moves are. It's always going to end this way. So folks, you need to be independent and responsible and focus on how to preserve your wealth, protect your purchasing power. And John, what's your bottom line as we wrap this up regarding the auto industry and what we're going to see down the line from places like GM and so many other car manufacturers, as we've seen in the past, go under?
No, they're going to struggle. At one point, people are not going to take 15-year loans on their cars. So I think we're going to see, it's going to be a bubble that has to burst. Like, they can't print money forever. But what's interesting is, I just want to mention one last thing that's a bottom line, and that's these zombie corporations. And a zombie corporation is basically a corporation that can't pay down its debt. It has to pay the just interest on the loans, Josh. And that's what it does. It just pays the interest. And that's what the government does today. That's what most big financial institutions does today. Everybody is just paying down the interest because they can't afford to pay down the principal at all. And you're just having these zombies that are never going to get out of debt. They're just getting into more and more debt, and it's completely unsustainable. It's just a mass amounts of debt. I don't know how many times I got to say it, Josh, but that's what it's all about. It's just this unsustainable debt bubble that we created, that there's nobody else to lend to anymore, and we're seeing just the downfall of that. it's a credit cycle, but it's more than that now. Like it's the failure of the monetary system. There's nobody like to massively in debt anymore, and people are getting fed up with it because you get so much high inflation. There's just so many bad symptoms of this fiat currency system, Josh, that we're just seeing the complete destruction of anything that we tried to create because we financialized it, and we're seeing it now. There's no way out of it. But again, you just got to get and protect yourself. That's the thing, and that's the way out of this, is to probably, if you can, if you're out of debt, you're in a good position compared to a lot of other people. There's so many people in the world today that are massively indebted, and we're just gonna have I think a complete monetary crisis. There's no way out of it now at this point. And it's not going to be too nice throughout that time, because people are going to suffer. People are going to really, really suffer. And it's all because of banksters that have, pushed the system forward together with the governments. Everybody's been in on it. And it's a crime racket. It's a cartel that have enslaved, and people are dying because of this on a worldwide scale, Josh. It's not just a joke about, like, it doesn't matter how much debt you have if you can grow the economy by creating a whole bunch of fake paper money, and you just see like, oh, the GDP is higher because we printed so much more money. No, that actually kills people. Look at Venezuela and other places. Idiots out there, you Keynesian bozos like Krugman and everybody else are promoting death and destructions around the world. That is not very good. If you're a good human being, you would actually look at yourself as a Keynesian economist and say like, hey, I'm promoting death and destruction around the world. People dying everywhere. Maybe I should stop promoting that.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I mean, you mentioned earlier how many times you have to say debt, and apparently enough times to fill 1,100 videos. So anyway, as always, folks, it comes down to individual responsibility. You guys, it all depends on what you do. Do not depend on others. Do not depend on banks or governments to fix the problems of banks or governments. Come on. It's pretty obvious at this point. We've been through 1,000+ years of fiat. We've been through 1,000+ years of democracy and government coercion and use of force and destruction of free will, etc., etc. It comes down to responsibility. So, as always, food, water, shelter, self-defense. You're not gathering things for the toughest guy on the block. Gold and silver as wealth insurance. This is our opinion, not investment advice, but it's not meant as an investment anyway. So, take it as it stands historically. And anyway, we've got an affiliate with Mike Maloney, which is pinned to the top of the comments, which I hope you guys check out at goldsilver.com. Guy's awesome. Really a big fan of Mike Maloney and his understanding of money history, monetary history, and the prevalence of gold and silver, and now cryptocurrencies as well. Decentralized, properly, fundamentally useful, as well as blockchain infrastructure. Do your own due diligence, folks, as always. But again, there are more solutions than there are problems. Now, John, I could hear Paul Krugman off and on barking at you in the background, so I'll let you go. And until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson and John Sneisen signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth.
Be the change.
Like what you see here, OM? Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so vastly demonetized and censored on YouTube, as these guys come in and flag all of our content as hate speech. Also, check out our Bitcoin address below, as well as on the screen for you to scan if you please. And also check us out at steemit.com. We're at Josh Sigurdson. It's a future of social media where you get paid in the upvote of your post in cryptocurrency. Steem, that is. So make sure to check us out there. Make sure to join us at Anarchapulco 2019 with people like Ron Paul, G. Edward Griffin, of course, Jeff Berwick, Vid Jedlicka. So many incredible speakers are going to be speaking. It's just a massively growing event. It is something you have to see to believe. So make sure to check it out below and save money on your tickets by using promo code WAM, that's WAM, and I hope to see you there. Also, check out our newsletter as we are getting demonetized and censored and all that. We don't know what comes next, so we have an email, worldalternativemedia@gmail.com. Send us an email with subject line YES, YES, and we will include you in the newsletter where we will continuously keep you updated. So until next time, thanks for watching, everyone. This is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
I I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.